Donaggio,
Yes.
the Italian composer, who did some horror films. You know, it's interesting. Are you recording? We're rolling now, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're rolling.
Okay, great, because I just jumped right in. Interesting story about the composer for that movie, The Howling, Pino Donaggio. I had just moved out here, and one of the very first film that I scored was a low-budget horror film, and it was screened at this place out here called the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. I'm sure you've heard about that group. It's
Yes.
it's an organization here that will throw light on movies that the Academy wouldn't dream of considering, you know, for Oscar stuff. And they were giving Pino Donaggio a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I knew the guy who was the co-runner, he ran this organization. He said, Pino Donaggio is going to be in town. You want to be a chauffeur for a day? Because he doesn't know how to drive, and he doesn't speak any English. I said, shit, yeah, man. Let me drive Pino Donaggio around town. And so I didn't speak any Italian. He didn't speak any English. So we were like, very physical kind of thing. But I spent a day with him, and it was a great day because I had to drive him around so he could visit different directors that he'd worked with. I don't who directed Piranha. I know not Piranha. Was it Piranha?
Joe Dante.
Joe Dante. No, I did not take him to Joe Dante's, but I took him to a few directors' homes. It was a great experience. But what was this famous song? Oh God! You know, song where he wrote something for Dusty Springfield.
Son of a Preacher Man?
No. You don't have to say you love me, da-dee-da-dee-dee. Do you know that song I'm singing, da-dee-da-dee-dee? Believe me, believe me, believe me. You don't have to say you love me, da-dee-da-dee-dee. You know that song?
I do know that song.
You don't have to say you love me is the name of the song.
Yes.
It was the hit, Dusty Springfield. And he wrote that, you know, it was like, it blows my mind. Great tune, man. Wow. Anyway, that's Donaggio. But I'm with you. Horror films, you know, they're kind of lifeless without the music. And so, yes, a simple little sound can change the outcome of how we perceive that film, you know.
How does the process work for you? Like, do you start by watching the film or talking to a director or the writer, or like, how does your process work?
I guess it's no different than it's no different at all than most people, in that it starts with watching the picture. I've gotten scripts for movies and read them and tried to imagine what the movie was like and started to hear music in my head. But I've learned that whatever I might come up with during that period of time before I actually see the film is going to end up in the garbage pail, because what I'm imagining the picture is going to look like and what it turns out to be is always something entirely different. So the music that I'm thinking of is relevant to an imaginary version of the movie. But that's what makes film composers the weird, unique creatures that we are, which is our brains come alive when we see a moving image, you know. Have us sit in front of a piano in front of a piano with blank music paper and ask us to write something, and we're kind of in trouble, some of us. We don't know what to do. But run an image, a moving image, even if it's something as dumb as a toothpaste commercial, and all of a sudden, boom, our heads are thinking music. So for me, it starts with seeing the film. interesting. I just watched a clip of an interview with James Newton Howard, and you know, and he was talking about how he writes music after he reads the script and hopes that it's going to fit into the picture. And he never sure until he sees the film. And then it's a fingers crossed kind of thing, because he likes to give the directors some music while they're shooting the film. I've never done that. I really haven't. I need to see it, and then it stimulates the notes in my head. The eyes. You know, it's interesting when sometimes when I'm kind of not having writer's block, because I don't really get writer's block, but there's times when I'm kind of stiff a little bit musically in the head. What I'll do is I'll get in the car and go for a drive. And I think just having things pass by me through the windows at a fairly fast speed, you know, especially if I get on a freeway, helps. Yeah. It helps because I see things, they're moving, boom, it sort of opens up the floodgate. So I think it's so much about the eyes and the images that, yes, that have, you know, that happen when the images are in motion. So does your brain go into motion. Writing, I probably struggle writing music for a series of still life pictures. I come up with something, but doesn't have the vitality, wouldn't have the vitality, excitement that if it was a moving image. Story, and then I'll shut up because I can babble on forever here.
No, you're fine. Talk as much as you want.
A case in point. I worked on a film called The Dark Half with George Romero.
Oh, that's a good movie.
I thought it was a great movie. But it's based on the Stephen King book, The Dark Half. And I remember before I went to see the film, after George hired me, I said, man, I didn't get the script. He didn't send the script over. I said, I got to read the book. I crammed through that book really quickly just to get a sense of what I was, you know, what the story's like. So when I went to see the film, I was already riding the wave. So I read the book and I got stuff's coming into my head and I have a vision of what the film is going to be like. And I love George, man. I was thrilled to be on that picture. Holy God. But in fact, the picture wasn't what I was expecting, you know, different. And the music that he had put in the temp wasn't what I was expecting either. And so it took me a while to make the transition, to get off one surfboard and get on the other one. And but ultimately it had a happy ending. You know, it's interesting. I sometimes reading, if it's based on a book, and a lot of the films, or a handful of, I should say not a lot, but a handful have been based on books. Reading the book in advance sometimes can confuse you. I remember when I worked on a film called Shipping News, which was a drama. That's based on a book by Anne, I can't remember her last name, but it was like a Pulitzer Prize winning book or something along those lines. Lasse Hallström, the director, said to me, whatever you do, don't read the book. He said, please don't read it, because it's going to confuse you, because the movie's not like the book. Okay, great. I didn't read it. And there was a movie called, going way back to the beginning of time, that I did called Flowers in the Attic. And that was based on the V.C. Andrews book.
Yes.
And it was a New World movie. And that, I thank my lucky stars I read the book. No one said I should. I just decided I was going to read it. And it brought a perspective to the picture that I may not have had I not read the book. That being, see it from the kid's point of view, specifically the daughter, because the daughter and the father who dies at the beginning have it's a father-daughter relationship, which I guess is pretty strong. He gives her a music box, as I recall, as a gift. That's the only thing she takes with her as a remembrance of her father, is this music box. So I thought, here is the key to pulling the score together. Write that music box theme and use that theme to reflect her experience. Because the music they put in the temp had been a combination of things that were getting the audience, the test audience, to laugh. And it was so the music. They put heavy horror music in that, or like drone synth stuff, and it just was hurting the picture. So the perspective that I brought to it came from reading the book.
That's just crazy, because when you think about it, like if I think of Hellraiser, for example, or even Flowers in the Attic, I'll think about...
What's Hellraiser? I don't know what you're talking about. Joking.
But when I think about a movie, or even like Rosemary's Baby's coming to mind from, I don't know why, that's been in my head, probably because I watched it the other night. But Sinister is another one. Like, you think of the music and you think of scenes, you think of plots and what happens. And does that kind of happen to you when you're working and writing music and creating all of this stuff? Do you is it something you think about all the time, or do you just it just comes to you, sort of?
It's a combination of both. In order for it to come to me, which it has to do, because you have to put out so much music so quickly. When you're actually down to the writing process, you pray that it's going to come out of you quickly, that you won't have to put your head through the ringer to get the notes to come forth. That's something that's happened over time. When I first started, the very first movie I worked on was a low-budget horror film called The Dorm That Dripped Blood. And that one, the score, I was like, it was like tortoise time. I mean, I was just crawling through that so slowly. And I thought, I'll never get this done. And I was pulling all-nighters. But one thing's for sure, the more experience you have, the deeper your well becomes, and the easier it is for you to come up with the right musical solution, sort of just as a reflex action to what you're saying. But in order for me to get to that place where it comes quickly, again, which it has to do, because there's so much music used in horror films, and you've got to pump it out, like I said, like a sausage factory. I have to spend some time with the film, and I have to do precisely the kind of things you're talking about. I like to take the film inside of me, watch it, absorb it, live with it, walk around with it, and try to, as I say, step behind the curtain and get into the dark internal world that this film lives in, and try to capture that somehow. What is the music that will best describe this very twisted and sick world that this picture exists in? Every great horror film, usually there's some sense of a mystery surrounding the storyline, something that's unknown at the beginning that needs to be solved. It's kind of like a detective story of sorts, with frightening revelations along the way. That's not the case necessarily in detective fiction. You find a dead body here, a dead body there. It's not, that's not no love story, but it's not like having the living daylights scared out of you. So that's kind of the exciting thing, is to try to find a way to have the music uh, um, lure the audience, into being willing to step into this forbidden world where everyone knows. I've never met a person who goes into it, unless they're total enthusiasts, who go into a horror film in a theater and aren't asking themselves, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to see this? They're always hesitant, or they're worried that it's going to scare, they're going to have nightmares that night. And so our job as composers is to try to get them to step behind the curtain, regardless of whether they know they're going to be having nightmares. They're going to watch it anyway. That's the fun stuff.
Did you always know that you wanted to do this, that you wanted to be in music? Because I read a little bit. I didn't want to read everything, and because I just wanted to ask you questions like I normally do, because I was really nervous when I found out I was even going to get to interview you. But that you started as a jazz drummer, and I love like Miles Davis and Etta James, even though she's not totally jazz, but it's what's coming to my mind right now. Did you kind of always know that this was your path, that this is what you were going to do?
Music or film music?
Music.
Music, yeah, I kind of did. I don't remember a day. No, I don't remember a day where I haven't had music in my head. It's always, for as long as I can remember. It's not like it just appeared one Christmas morning when I opened up a package left by Santa Claus or something. No, it's always there. Now, I can't remember thoughts I was having, when I was a day old or like that, but I just cannot remember a moment in my life where I've not had music in my head almost all the time. It's just become such a regular state of being. Now, for someone who's not a composer, not a musician, then they understand that, but they can't really understand that because they don't have music in their heads all day long. They have it a regular part of their lives, but when it's not playing, when they're not listening, chances are it's not happening. With composers, especially, they're always working through stuff in their heads, even more so than when they're listening. They listen for sure, but that takes up only a small portion of their day. Rather, they're busy writing and creating. So music was always in my head, but at the beginning, I'd be lying to you if I said that when I was a kid, I was inventing my own music immediately. No, I was pretty much regurgitating in my head the music I was hearing around me, especially rock and roll on the radio, because that was the only source of, and that and records were the only source of music that I came in, and some live concerts for sure. But pretty much, it seemed like rock and roll, from according to the radio, and Frank Sinatra, and that kind of music, the jazz stuff. That was the only music that was out there. The classical orchestral thing, I wasn't on the radio. The only time I heard orchestras is when I watched movies. I was like, oh, what is that? It's not an electric guitar. What is that instrument? Oh, it's not an instrument. That's a lot of instruments playing together. So that's how I was introduced to the orchestra. And but nonetheless, I was planning to stay with drums for a very forever. And that was my objective. I went to Berklee School of Music for a summer session, the jazz school in Boston. And I studied with a hero of mine whose name was Alan Dawson. He played with Dave Brubeck, the Take 5 jazzer composer. And I was hoping I was going to impress him, but I went over like a fucking bag of dynamite. I mean, no, wet dynamite. It just didn't happen. And so I was pretty crushed. And it was the turning point, sort of, it made me realize probably I should take these sticks that I had in my hand all the time, but he didn't know to, and put them in the closet and try to figure out what's next. My parents never wanted me to be a composer. They never wanted me to have anything to do with music. My dad, again, don't say I love my parents for sure. My dad was tone deaf. I mean, seriously, the only time my dad never listened to music, never. He didn't even know how to turn the car radio on. He didn't even know how to turn the knob.
Oh my God.
The only time we had any music going around is when we had an experience that included music was, when we go to church on Sunday and we'd sing the hymns, And I just remember standing next to my dad, if I wasn't in the choir, which was a great, and my dad would moan these songs. God rest ye very gentle, let nothing you despise. Like that, he couldn't stay in key and pitch. He was just all over the place. And so he didn't get what the hell was going on with me. He was a lawyer, and his dad was a lawyer, and his dad's dad was a lawyer. And
so did they want you to become a lawyer?
I have two brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. I was the middle. The classic middle son syndrome. And I'll go into it was definitely the classic middle son syndrome. But he was hoping one of us was going to follow in his footsteps, and none of us did. Not one of us did. And I tried. I did. I took classes in law when I was in college. And it was embarrassing. I mean, they'd be talking, and I'd notice, I'd start looking out the window, and they'd be discussing a case, and I would have music going. They go, Mr. Young, could you talk about the blah? And I go, what?
Yeah.
Totally, always daydreaming. I always had music in my head. So I thank my lucky stars that I stuck to my guns. I'm amazed I did. I thank my lucky stars that I was young enough and naive enough to move out here without knowing anybody at all. That was 1980, before you were born. And, I didn't know anybody. It's a miracle things have worked out the way they have. Did I choose to become like the horror guy? No, I don't. It's not like I hate slasher movies. Sorry to say, I hate them.
All right.
Well, I've worked on many of them, too many of them. I like what you can do musically in them, but I'm not a slasher. I don't like those kinds of, but I love is a great ghost story. Oh man. There's nothing, my favorite, I call it spook. I hate using the word horror. My favorite spooky movie or whatever, dark movie, was The Haunting, the original black and white Haunting, directed by Robert Wise. You know which one I'm talking about? Not the remake with Catherine Zeta-Jones.
No, the original.
Original. That's a great ghost story. And that's based on a book by Shirley Jackson. You can't see this because the camera's pointed on this wall, but on the other side of this very wall that this camera's pointing at, I have a gigantic book collection. Now, a lot of them are music books for sure, but I also have a gigantic collection of classic ghost stories. I have a gigantic collection of ghost stories.
What are some of your favorites?
Favorite authors or favorite stories?
Kind of both.
I'm going to have to say probably I don't have super favorites. One that like, oh, this is the one.
Yeah.
I do love Shirley Jackson. I have all of her stuff again. She was the haunt. She wrote The Haunting, and We
Mhm.
Have Always Lived in the Castle. Uh, Her famous short story, The Lottery, is one that put her on the map, I think. Uh, Life with the Savages. She wrote a book on the Salem witchcraft trials. Uh, but I would have to say, um, Algernon Blackwood.
Okay.
Algernon Blackwood is one of my favorites. Sheridan Le Fanu. Sax Rohmer, because of Morris Claw, who was the dream detective. I liked a lot of occult detective fiction. It was like a cross between Sherlock Holmes and ghosts. And yeah, it was kind of like all the stuff was written in the late 1800s, early 1900s, most of it, yeah. And Maurice Claw was Sax Rohmer's psychic or ghost detective who would go into a room and sleep. And through his dreams, he would have visions of what had happened in the house to cause the manifestations. You know, it's like did you ever see that film called From Hell?
Yes.
With Johnny Depp getting
Yes.
getting stoned on opium and having these visions.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. This is the same concept. The guy who comes up with avenues of understanding the reasons why certain places are haunted because of the visions that come to him in his dreams. Anyway, William Hope Hodgson, uh, God, Oliver Onions. Most of these people are English or Irish, Scottish, Bram Stoker, you know. You got it. I mean, these kind of guys. That I have so many books, and I'm talking in some instances first editions. It's a gorgeous collection. And actually, if I was to lift this camera up a bit, which you're not seeing, is I also have a gigantic collection. My pride and joy in terms of collections are jack-o'-lantern masks.
Oh.
I have hundreds of a few hundred, at least, yeah, a few hundred jack-o'-lantern masks. Not here. I have some here, and then most of them are at home in cases in my garage.
When did you get into that?
The actual collecting or jack-o'-lanterns themselves. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns. Well, for a kid who actually just adored Halloween, from New Jersey. Fortunately, when I was a kid, this is pre, made in Japan, China or Japan, plug-in pumpkins, that are plastic and already carved. You just plug into the wall. You had to go out and buy actual real pumpkins and carve them. People still do it, but it was the only way to do it back then, and that was a big event. Was going out. I loved it, and this was something that this kicked off the Halloween kind of season within the family, because we go out and choose pumpkins as a family, bring them back home at least a week in advance and carve them and start putting candles in and lighting them. The fascinating thing is, remember now the plug-in pumpkins, people do this. They opt to do this because it's a safe thing. I get it, but you can drive down the street and see this exact same expression on all these plastic pumpkins. But back in those days, everyone had to try to carve something into a pumpkin. There were absolutely no two that were exactly the same. So you could walk around town trick-or-treating as a kid and be greeted by something new at every doorstep, And I just thought that I know this may sound corny, but not to you. I know it won't. You'll get it.
No.
It won't be corny. But when I was a kid, I used to spend a fair amount of time, believe it or not, staring in. I loved looking at pumpkins
Mm-hmm.
and the candle, you know, flickering behind that wonderful scent of, you don't smell that anymore, of the candle burning the lid, the inside lid of the pumpkin. There was that burnt pumpkin smell. And it was the whole vibe. And late at night, we'd light these things and I would go out and look at them. And I kind of felt, in a strange, wonderfully weird way, that experience acted as a conduit between the visible and the invisible world. I was always wondering, what is going out there in the dark that we can't see? And the pumpkin sort of gave me that what was the word? The tangible transition of sorts between here and there. And so I became obsessed. I mean, I really loved it, but it wasn't until much later when I was out here that it came alive,
Mm-hmm.
where I realized that it was really inside me. And that was, I went into, I think it was called Oz. It was like one of these, it just went out of business, one of these stores that had a great collection of Halloween paraphernalia come Halloween that you could buy for your house. And they had masks. And I remember walking in there and seeing this mask that was, what did they call it? It had 3 faces. It was called the Lantern. And it had a face on the left, a face on the right, and a face on the front, a jack-o'-lantern. And I was totally taken back by it. And I remember didn't have the money at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that the day after Halloween, everything went on sale, half price. And I would go and check to make sure no one had bought it. And lo and behold, the day after fucking Halloween, I was there before they opened the door, and I ran to it and bought it, and it started the snowball rolling, and it's grown and grown. I've kind of cooled down. I'm not as obsessed with it as I used to be. You know, I would never claim to have, I have a large collection. I have no idea who's got the largest. I'm just talking about masks. I have a lot of other pumpkin paraphernalia too. It's all pumpkin. I have a bathroom in my house that's completely crammed with pumpkin paraphernalia. You can barely, you can sit in it for sure. And the sink's available, but you sit down and there's pumpkin stuff all around you.
That's amazing, though. I think one of the coolest things I ever got to do was, and it kind of happened by accident, I'm not even sure, but my aunt actually had pumpkin seeds and she gave them to me, and I thought, I'm going to plant these, like, see what happens. Literally half of my backyard turned into a pumpkin patch, and it was just the most amazing thing ever. And one of the first pumpkins that I cut and grew was a 25-pound pumpkin, and it was just the greatest thing ever to me.
Oh, I bet. How old were you?
It was just a couple of years ago. I just turned 40.
Okay.
But yeah, that was literally, because I've never done that before. Like, I grew tomatoes and stuff like that, but I thought, I'm going to actually try this and see if I can grow a pumpkin. And I literally had a pumpkin patch. I was in shock.
I've never tried to grow them. I should try to grow them. It's interesting. I buy these things, but I never wear them.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of afraid to wear them or something like that. Sometimes occasionally I'll put one on for a moment, but for the most part, I just look at them. I put them on a pedestal and let them be what they are, and don't try to put them on my head. None of that happy Halloween stuff. Was it Halloween 3 or whatever? Remember that?
Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch, the pumpkin head.
Pumpkin head on.
That's right. By the
That's
way,
neat.
I've got one of the. I don't have the one they used on the for the movie for sure, but I've got one of the ones that was issued back in those days when the film came out. One of the original ones that were made by, I guess, Don Post. I got one of those. Anyway, so lots of pumpkin stuff, and I've got the other thing I collect. Though I kind of reached the maximum, are universal character actor that were in many of their mostly horror pictures. And I've got the obvious ones to the less obvious ones, from Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr. to Maria Ospensky and George Zuko,
Those are the rare ones.
Yeah, I mean, these are these guys played crazy people or monsters in these Universal movies or Monogram movies, but most of their lives they were involved in horror,
I see a couple figures on a shelf behind you, and in the corner I see a really cool looking pumpkin.
Which one's that one? Are you talking about that over there?
Yes.
What's one in the corner? Oh, this guy. Hey, we should do this. That fella?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know where, I can't remember where I found that, but that's kind of nifty, right?
Yeah, that is neat. I love his eyes and like the definition. You can see him, like the facial expression. It's really neat.
I've had him for years and years and years. I got him here in LA somewhere. I see him every day. I've gotten so used to having him. Here's another one. One of his friends. I've got some big ones in the recording studio.
Oh my gosh, look at his face. That's neat.
Yeah, isn't that pretty cool?
Oh my gosh.
And I have over there, you can't see, but in that case over there, I have a death mask or life mask. I'm not even sure if they were of different horror actors. Plaster molds of their faces taken from masks, that they wore.
So does that any of that kind of serve as inspiration for you when you're working?
Well, it must. It has to. Yes, I would be. Yeah, I mean, it's there. Definitely, I would say that doing this Halloween attraction thing keeps it alive in me. It does. I love doing that. I love going through them alone, and it's just that experience of being in a physical space that acknowledges and allows you to be alive in a living environment that's like the movies that I work on. I never go on location, so I don't see these sets. So that's good. Yeah, that's definitely this stuff I've got a whole row of masks right on this wall here. You can't see them, but anyway, yes, it's important. I think it's just having this kind of a situation here, this kind of decor. It does. I see it every day. It must have some sort of an effect. If I was to take it down today, would I be able to write with all of a sudden my horror scores go down the tube? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I would think not too, but one thing's for sure is that they have provided, and you're right, they have definitely provided an environment that I like being in, and that's helpful.
Would you ever consider like creating a haunt or doing your own haunt? Would you ever like consider doing that?
It's fascinating you should ask that question. I was asked many, many years ago to write music for a local haunt, which I did do. I've thought about it. But if I was to do something like that, chances are, you know, it would be done at a tremendous financial loss, because as much as I love, you know, the idea of, they're all kind of somewhat the same. It starts with you walking through an entrance, and it ends after you walk down paths that take you here, there, and everywhere with an exit. It's all about walking through an environment, of which are made up of, you know, quite imaginative usage of set designs, props, and actors, you know. And I want to do something totally different. I won't go into it now, but I've thought about it for sure. You know, I've thought about it for sure.
Very cool. That would be something I would love to see you create, because that would be something from like a totally different perspective, and it would be amazing.
Yeah, it could be amazing. It might be. Again, I don't have the technical chops to know how to pull it off. I can only have a vision of what I think it could be, as I have had. I haven't been asked this question. I haven't chased this, but there was a time when I was seriously thinking of doing it. It's been years. I mean, not seriously thinking of doing it, but always asking myself, what would I do if? And I came up with a concept, but I haven't addressed it. I haven't really thought about it in a long time. I'd need to surround myself with people who could make this concept a reality, and that's the tough thing. Yeah.
What advice would you offer to anyone kind of in the industry, I guess, as a whole, because you've been doing this for so long and you have so much experience, and I imagine you're always learning, and just being as talented as you are, what would you say to people who might be scared to start or just aren't sure what to do?
Right. I can only speak about the world of film music. At one time, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to be a rock star drummer, jazz star drummer, and then there was the idea of writing, becoming a songwriter, you know, maybe the Broadway musical. But I ended up in film music, so that's the only world I can really speak about. For every reason a composer can think of why they should continue to pursue this dream of wanting to get involved in movies, there's 1,000 other reasons why they could talk themselves out of it, especially if they're young and they're not in an environment that's supportive. You know, it's not an easy road if everybody in your hometown is telling you you're making the biggest mistake of your life. And that's kind of what often puts the candle out, douses the flame, even before, at a very young age, way too young an age. Remember, the composers generally don't come into their own until they're much older. Now, if you want to be a rock and roll star, yeah, maybe you should drop out of college, you know, because by the time you're 36, you're kind of over the hill in the world of rock and roll, sort of. You know, certainly there's people that haven't struck it till they're in their 40s, but for the most part, you know, rock and roll and pop music is about young people communicating to young people in a language that's pertinent to those young people. And when you're 40, it's kind of hard to connect with people who are in their 17 and in their 20s. And they're the people that go to the concerts. Anyway, the thing that's wonderful about film music is it does take, and it is a career in which you are encouraged to grow and have the time to grow. So if you're not a star by the time you're 25, guess what? I've never met a single film composer who was a star by the time they were 25. Most of them don't become stars or start their careers until they're well into their 30s. So, and yet there are some who don't start making their name, don't start really developing a career until they're in their 40s, you know. Max Steiner, you know, wrote King Kong, talking about, you know, the great King Kong score, which sort of changed the history of film music, let alone horror movie music. He was in his 40s when he wrote that. Okay, he just really had started in, you know, in the film music industry had just started when he created that wonderful score. Anyway, my advice to those people are, please, I beg of you all, those of you that are listening, if in your heart you have this passion for film music, don't let that go. I don't care who tells you what. Pay no, listen to the guidance that they're trying to give you and the advice and the forewarnings, but don't let it stop you. I tell everyone who comes out, who finally makes it out here, first and foremost, you have to survive the first year. I came out here with completely unrealistic expectations in my head because I didn't have everyone in my hometown vote, you know, like rooting for me. You know, it was like, if I don't make it happen in a year, maybe I'm fooling myself and I should go home. Well, after a year, you know, I was no better off than, well, that's not true, but I certainly didn't have my name on the big screen when I was in my first year, and I would cry every day and think I was making a terrible mistake. So I beg of those of you who may be watching this, don't let anyone talk you out of it, please. And it doesn't, you know, if you fall in love with film music, it doesn't, it's not a requirement that you come to LA, but it certainly is not such a bad place to be if that's what you're wanting to do. This is the center of filmmaking in the world, in the universe, whatever, and certainly the center of all things film music. Also, you know, pop music, recorded pop music is big here. Yes, there's some jazz music that happens, West Coast jazz, that's alive and happening here. Musical theater, there's some of it, but it's not like New York City. Commercial music, yeah, that's kind of happening here, but this is not the key center for commercial music. Game music becoming more and more so out here as well. There's so many different opportunities. I've had the great fortune, because I teach both here in LA and overseas, of meeting lots and lots of young composers, just like the people that may be watching this right now, who have dreams of, or were dreaming of trying to come to LA. I'm talking about people from countries overseas. And I used to have a house that I bought that was specifically for young composers who were thinking of coming out here, but didn't know anybody. They didn't know where to go, who to speak to. And it was a house for composers, and I could have 4 to 5 people there. And you were allowed to stay there for 4 months. Now, I wanted it to be free, but I couldn't. I had to charge, I think it was like $400 or something like that a month, which is pretty cheap rent out here. And it was great because a lot of people came here not knowing anybody, developed friendships, and stayed on and have made a go of it. One of the guys that stayed in that house of mine has since won an Oscar, believe it or not, for best music, and that was Ludwig Göransson, who wrote the music to Black Panther. And yes, and he stayed at this house that I had. And so that's exciting for me to try to, when I see that I can try to make those who are on the fence actually make the trip out here and watch and see how it changes their lives for the better. I've never met anyone who said it ruined their lives. You know, some have chosen to go back home, but no one says it has ruined their lives. Listen, everybody wants to be the next John Williams. No one is gonna be. So it's how do you live with yourself knowing that you're not, chances are you're not going to be the next John Williams, you know. Not to say you can't be, I'm sorry, it's not like it can't happen, but what happens if it doesn't happen? How are you going to manage to get through your life? And I think every film composer that I know has that same anxiety, you know. It's like, it's not quite enough, you know. You know, John's got it. That's the career I wish I had, you know. This envy here in LA is so out of control. We all envy. We pretend not to be, but it's all about massive envy. We're all insecure. And actually the careers I think that last the longest in LA are the ones in which the person manages to successfully disguise their massive insecurities, you know.
I think it's good though that everybody is unique and different and sort of does their own thing. And I know, like, when I hear something from you, like, it's instant, like you kind of like, you know, that's your work.
You know, that I miss that. I keep listening to my stuff and I hear the influences and I go, oh, man, maybe that's why I don't get, you know, nominations for none of my scores have ever gotten nominated. You know, I'm in a bookstore just before we did this interview, started this interview.
Mm-hmm.
There was a book I just came across on the life of Bill Murray, you know about the comedian.
Yes.
And I did a score for one of Bill Murray's movies. It was called The Man That Knew Too Little, a comedy. I've done a handful of comedies, and that was one of them. That book trashed that movie. Said, why the hell did Bill Murray do this movie? It was awful. And I went, really? That movie, what was I missing? Is it really that bad? I guess, you know, ultimately, if you don't work on great movies, you're kind of, I appreciate you saying so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you saying you listen to my music and you hear me in it. Because I struggle with that. I go, who am I exactly? You know.
Who influenced you that when you listen to it, like, who do you hear?
Well, I can give you a very long shopping list of people, but if I'm being honest with you, in the world of film music, John Williams, I appreciate, of course, massively brilliant and all that wonderful stuff, but he never really, that wasn't my cup of tea. I was definitely, I didn't tell you that Bernard Herrmann was the guy who made me fall in love with movie music. I heard a record of his and it blew my mind. And that was the fantasy film world of Bernard Herrmann. And that had his scores for science fiction films like Journey to Center of the Earth, Fahrenheit 451, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, the Ray Harryhausen movie. And these scores blew my mind. So I definitely think Herman's influenced me, and I definitely think Goldsmith has influenced me. And I've been trying to overcome their influences throughout my life. And I used to listen to both of them like a drug addict, like a junkie would shoot up. I mean, I listened to them on film music. I mean, I knew all of Jerry's stuff, all of Herman's stuff, everything. Plus lots of other film composers. And I realized, you know what, man, if you want to get over these guys, you're trying to find your own voice, you got to quit them like you would quit a drug cold goddamn turkey. So I don't listen. I didn't listen to them ever for years and years and years. And I think in time, my voice started to turn into something that was further away, far further removed from those two guys than it was at the beginning.
Think you're ever going to write a book and tell your story?
No. But I don't think my stories my life is not interesting enough, I don't think, to merit that kind of attention. And certainly the films I've done, it's not like I'm John Williams and I've scored one like epic film after the next. Most of the pictures I've worked on are not very well known, except amongst the horror portion of my output is known by you and horror fans, and I adore them. I love. You've been to those conventions, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love them. I go as a fan. You know, I just like to hang around and meet the people, just be with them, because I love them. And in those rooms, they know who I. You know, some of them know who I am. But you step outside of that world, and you're really. I mean, certainly, yeah, you know. Hollywood come right now this season. I got to tell you, this time of the year, I'm the most depressed. Why? Because another year goes by and I realize there's nothing I'm ever done, nor I will ever do, that's ever going to make it into that room, going to allow me to even get a nomination in that room. And it's not the music. It took me years to get to that place. It's not because the music's bad. It's just, first of all, they don't nominate scores for horror pictures. They don't nominate horror films unless it's an arty, like Bram Stoker's Dracula or something, you know, or The Exorcist, the occasional one, you know. But for the most part, these are freaks that get you know, and comedies, you know. They're the two. You do comedy, you do horror films, the two extreme emotions, and you're out. So no, I don't think there's enough going on in my life to merit an autobiography. There's a couple of guys who claim they're writing biographies about me, and I believe they're sincere about it. I've had one guy who started to do it, and he just didn't know how to do it, and it dead ended. We'll see. But definitely I'm going to be doing a book. I teach, and it's going to be about, it's like a textbook of the materials that I cover when I'm teaching. That I can do. I'm going to do an online class. I'm trying to get that together, that you can download or whatever. And yeah, there's I have a sample library out. So there'll be things that are going to be around other than the music. This photography thing I've become obsessed with. Black and white photography, very strange stuff. I think you're going to like, maybe, hopefully you'll like some of it, because it's definitely coming from a guy who was raised with pumpkins.
How long have you been doing the photography for?
About 5 years, 5 or 6 years. I just stumbled into this idea of taking black and white pictures by chance when I was in the French Quarter of New Orleans. Mm-hmm. I you know, your cell phone, all of a sudden I realized you could take pictures on this thing. Yeah, okay. And I'm, you know, doing whatever, you know, taking color pictures just of places I've been, just as a memento for remembering that time. And I, you know, happened to push the black and white button. I wish I could say it was done intentionally. And then I was in the cemetery there, and boom, I said, wait a second, this is kind of cool. Because I had been working with someone and trying to put a book together prior to that. But he was doing the shooting and I was saying, do this and do this and do that. But I wasn't happy. It was a book about pumpkins and masks and pumpkin masks. And I just wasn't working for me. I needed to be behind. I discovered I needed to be the one behind the camera. So I've amassed, how many pictures did you say I've got going?
150,000.
What's that?
150,000.
Not 250.
150.
150.
Wow.
150,000 black and white pictures. And I'm now picking through to put together a series of books, you know. And they're all strange, my friend. There's nothing in them that's trying to be normal.
That's amazing. Now,
Very few of people. It's mostly taking situations, things that I see, and then modifying them by using the settings,
filters and settings and
all that stuff, and making them as dark and fucked up as you can make them. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's kind of what I mean. Yeah.
sounds fascinating though.
Yeah. So no autobiography, I don't think. No.
Now, what about your teaching? Like how can people join you and actually get taught by you? And do you teach just film or music in general?
No, I just film music. I have a film music class at USC. I've been on the faculty in the graduate film scoring program for probably 24 years or something like that. Long time. And that blossomed when programs started springing up overseas. I started getting involved in those. The program, the programs that I travel overseas to be a part of, one of them is called GEMS, GEMS, and that's a great program that happens in Madrid, Spain. So I'm a regular part of that. There is what is it called? What is the name of it? It used to be called, God, the name of the program has changed. What's Andy's program called now? Europeans Film Scoring.
I'm looking it up right now.
It went through a name change. It used to be called Pulse College.
Film Scoring Academy of Europe.
Film Scoring what?
Film Scoring Academy of Europe.
Film Scoring Academy of Europe. I'm going there in April. It now takes place, it used to take place in Dublin. Now it's taking place in Sofia in Bulgaria. And I go there and I teach for a week. Varna in Bulgaria on the Black Sea. I do that every summer. These are all pretty cheap programs. I used to do Pulse College in Dublin, Ireland. I've been to the one in Vienna on an occasion. That's kind of the places that I do regularly. I just did one class yesterday for a program that's happening in New Orleans. So in answer to your question, this requires that you be there, you know. As I said, I'm in the process of shooting some footage of me doing essentially the same thing I do when I'm at USC, and that will be up and running hopefully before the year is over. So I guess, you know, you go to my website or whatever, and you'll find out more information on where you can go to get that.
And are you working on any films right now?
You knew you were going to ask me this question. No, I'm not. No. There was a film that came out earlier this year called The Empty Man, which came and went. Did you see that? Did you hear anything about that? No.
I heard about it, but I did not see it yet.
No one saw it. It played in the theater for maybe 45 minutes. I don't know. I mean, like really great, a really good movie for sure. One of those, I don't call what you call mind fuck movies.
David
like,
Pryor directed it. I know that.
yeah,
Yep.
I love David, and I think you should watch the film. I think you really like it. That came out. I did a Quibi thing, you know, and I'm interviewing for things. I have my fingers crossed, but you know, it just doesn't seem like what I do is in demand like it used to be anymore. And I guess it happens to everybody, you know, unless you happen to be you know, connected with a director like Steven Spielberg, who making movies even from the hospital bed when he's you know, nearly, you know, about ready to kick the can, as it were. He'll still be making movies, and John will still be scoring them. You get a director who's there for a lifer, and there's still an interest in them. But none of the directors that I mean, some of the directors are, you know, like Sam Raimi. Yeah, he's doing a movie now, but I already know he's not going to be using me on that one, which is unfortunate. You know, he's going to go to Danny for that one. And Scott Derrickson, who's absolutely remarkable. Boy, he's doing a movie, and maybe I'll be able to get reconnected with him. But a lot of the directors that I've worked with are struggling to get a picture going, you know, and don't have that superstar status that they should have yet. And if they're not,
Really.
what's that?
Go ahead.
No, I was saying if they're not working, then chances are I'm not going to be working, you know.
It's hard enough now, like with coronavirus, but I always kind of get, I don't want to say sad, but it is kind of sad because there's so much talent in the horror genre, in kind of the spooky season genre, and it always kind of seems like horror gets pushed aside, like no matter what you do, directing, writing. And the horror fans are always like, my whole life I grew up and I went to Catholic school for a brief point of time, and like I was going to hell for everything. And
You are going to go to hell, but I'll be down there. Remember, I did Hellbound.
Composing, yes.
I did the film Hellbound, you know, so I'm going to be down there. I've done a lot of movies, you know, that included the devil. Way too many. I've done I think 5 movies that have the devil.
Drag Me to Hell too. That
Drag Me to Hell, Hellbound, Bless the Child had the devil in it. Exorcism of Emily Rose that had the devil in it. All these movies that have the devil in it, you know.
I got goosebumps.
To the pearly gates and, you know, St. Peter's gonna be, what the fuck you doing here, buddy? Get going down there. You're hellbound, brother. I don't know.
But it is funny though, because like my whole life, like I couldn't really almost tell certain people that, oh, I love horror movies, because it would be like, you're the, you know, get holy water or something and like throw it at me. But now it's like some of my best friends are horror fans and they're amazing, and it's almost like horror is a little bit more accepted, but it's still kind of like, we'll put them in the corner, you know.
That's a wonderful thing about those conventions, is if nothing else, you realize that there are people around this planet,
and how amazing they are,
and how amazing and normal they are. And they happen to have the same affection that you have, that within the community of those unlike-minded, you were considered to be a kook, like I was a kook. I remember when I finally got nominated, I actually won an award from the Science Fiction Academy, Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. I was just in heaven, because I realized, you know, I'm not alone. I'm not the crazy person my parents believed I was, because here is a whole academy that devotes itself to those who do exactly what I'm doing or work in different disciplines towards the same goal that I was working for. And so it's nice to know that we're not alone. And there is a fan base. You don't find conventions of romantic comedies, comedy conventions, right?
I get asked all the time, like when people find out like that I write for horror news, or, you know, do this or that, and somebody will say, well, do you watch regular movies? Sorry, I did the air quotes too, but I'm like, what is a regular movie though? What do you consider a regular? Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre to me it's a regular movie. It's Sinister is it's a movie. I mean, it's a horror movie, but it's not like what is a like. Yes, I watch other movies, but I like horror movies.
Yeah, well, you know what? You and enough people to keep. I mean, as you know, about the history of Hollywood movie making, horror
Hmm.
film kept companies from going bankrupt. Universal was kept from going bankrupt. New Line Pictures, because of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, was kept from going bankrupt. Constantly, you know, New Dimension films, the what were they called? The Scream movies. You know,
Hmm.
they financed Miramax's dramatic movies. They bring the money in because they can be done somewhat relatively cheaply and make a huge profit because people love them. They do pay money to go see them. As sick as you know, we are being told we should believe ourselves to be. There's enough of us sickos, I guess, that can finance these arty pictures that are the ones that get the nominations. So it's a, you know, I'm with you. It's, you know, that's normal stuff to you and me.
And the conventions, like I've been going to Monster Mania and Chiller and Wizard World, like for pretty long, for pretty many years, since maybe 2000, 2001. But everybody that I've met, they've always been the nicest people you'll ever meet. Like my horror friends are probably the best people I know. Like they're
Oh, yeah,
just
sure.
kind and fun and good
Yeah,
people.
yeah. They're not, you know, and you'll notice that as you've noticed with people who work in horror films,
Hmm.
they're not they're not nutcases. They're pretty mellow, you know, like normal kind of folk, I guess, who just have this interest in those kinds of movies and that, you know, those kinds of books and whatnot. Um, but, you know, I think there's this general misconception anyone who works in horror films has to, you know, what at least they go to bed when the sun comes up and
Yeah.
wake when the sun goes down, you know, and beware, you know, they're all vampires, you know, you know. So no, they're all great people. I know exactly what you mean. And I think one of it has to do with the fact that, you know, everyone's so excited to be
Hmm.
in the presence of people who understand them, that they're overjoyed and sweet and loving and kind, because, you know, they're not the freaks, I guess, that in their hometowns they were led to believe they were. So you know, yeah, I'm with you totally. I love the community of people that show up at those conventions. I'm the luckiest guy to have made friends with some of those folk, you know.
I've taken so much of your time, but I do want to ask you what you would want to say to the horror community as anything, just what you would want to say.
Um, Gee, this is a tough one. I've never been asked this, but I would say from kind of from the bottom of my heart, really. Um, you know, my life really, when you get down to it, has been defined by the music that I have written for a lot of scary movies, horror films. I've wanted to get recognition for films that don't fall into that world. But the fact of the matter is, I haven't really. At the end of the day, in all probability, etched on my tombstone will be, oh, you know, the guy that wrote the score to Hellraiser, you know. So, uh, whereas I spend way too much time beating myself up for this, I know that all I have to do is think about the wonderful people like yourself who actually, you know, listen and love what I'm doing and are moved by it and have taken it into their lives, and it's enriched them. Even though it's scary music, you know, some of it's intended to scare you. There's nothing really wrong with that. So I say to the horror fans that may be tuning into this, I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for being kind enough to allow the music that I've written to enter your world, and for you to have embraced it, and to have, over the years that I've come across you all in the conventions, to give me love. Because anyone who creates, at the end of the day, they do because they want to be loved, right? They may pretend like they don't, but they want to be loved, they want to be heard, they want to be understood. And apparently God wanted me to write music for horror movies. I don't understand why, but he did. I thought he wanted me to write music that made people happy and nice little melodies and bright, positive, major keyed music to make us all feel really good. But no, there's something that he put inside of me that I have tried to exercise for myself at times, but it's not happening. And so, fortunately, in my bleakest of moments, I think about the fact that it actually, I'm reminded of people that I met at these conventions who truly vibrate on what I'm doing. The Academy doesn't give a crap about what I'm doing, but the fans do. So to the horror fans, thank you very, 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 very much.
Well, I'm sure they're very grateful, and I'm very grateful. There are moments I think I'm forgetting how to breathe, but the Academy should appreciate you. I know that much. Not
Not me, but I'm talking about all of, not just me. I'm talking about the genre.
Yeah.
I don't want to become like a crusty old fuck who's no, I'm talking about the whole genre.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to sound like an ego thing here. It's unfortunately people who devote themselves to horror films are not gonna, it just ain't gonna ring. Hollywood seems to be embarrassed by these kind of films this time of year. When the minute the Oscars are over, bam, the next wave of pictures that you will see will be horror films, probably. Anyway, I appreciate that. Again, I want to make sure you understand that this is not me complaining or bitching about being typecast or like that. I'm lucky, damn blessed that God gave me this gift and it found a home in these movies.
100%. And I'm glad that you're part of these movies and making music and doing what you do.
I thank you very much.
I thank you so, so, so much for your time, Chris. And you're just, there aren't even words to kind of express. You're just amazing. And like I said, you're kind of part of this, I call it the soundtrack of my life. So,
Oh, that's great.